The barren, windswept plains of the planet Erythros stretched endlessly under a blood-red sky. Sharp, jagged rocks jutted out of the cracked earth, casting long, eerie shadows. Amid this hostile environment, a young alien girl named Lyra staggered forward, her once vibrant green skin now dulled by exhaustion. Every step was a struggle as she navigated the treacherous terrain, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Lyra had been abandoned here, left to die by her own people, the Zephyrins. They saw her as a liability, a weakling unfit for the harsh realities of survival. The Zephyrins were a proud race, valuing strength and resilience above all else. When their ship crashed on this forsaken planet, they deemed Lyra unworthy of their limited resources and made the cruel decision to leave her behind. A deep rumble vibrated through the ground, sending shivers down Lyra's spine. She glanced around nervously, her large, luminous eyes scanning the horizon for danger. The planet was home to monstrous creatures, beasts that thrived in the harshest conditions. Lyra had already encountered a few during her days of wandering, barely escaping with her life each time. Suddenly, a low growl pierced the silence. Lyra froze, her heart pounding in her chest. From behind a cluster of rocks, a massive creature emerged, its scales glinting ominously in the dim light. The beast was enormous, towering over Lyra with rows of razor-sharp teeth and glowing yellow eyes that locked onto her with a predatory gleam. There was no time to think, only to act. Lyra turned and ran, her legs pumping furiously as she darted between rocks and craters. The creature roared in pursuit, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Lyra's mind raced, searching for a way out, but the landscape offered little in the way of refuge. Just as the beast closed in, a deafening blast echoed through the air. Lyra stumbled and fell, her hands scraping against the rough ground. She looked up in shock to see the creature staggering, a gaping wound in its side. It let out a final, agonized roar before collapsing in a heap, lifeless. Breathing heavily, Lyra slowly turned her gaze toward the source of the blast. A group of humans was approaching, their weapons still smoking from the recent shot. Leading them was a tall, imposing figure clad in battle-worn armor. His stern expression softened slightly as he took in the sight of the terrified girl. "You all right?" he asked, lowering his weapon as he approached. His voice was rough, but there was a kindness in his eyes that caught Lyra off guard. Lyra nodded, too stunned to speak. The humans were unlike anyone she had ever seen before, their technology far more advanced than anything her people possessed. She couldn't help but wonder what they were doing on this desolate planet. The man extended a hand to help her up. "Name's Captain Elias Morgan. What's your name?" "Lyra," she replied softly, her voice trembling. "Thank you for saving me." Captain Morgan nodded, his expression serious. No one deserves to be left behind, especially not in a place like this. He glanced at his team, who were busy scanning the area for any more threats. "We're setting up camp nearby. You're welcome to join us." Lyra hesitated, still wary of these strangers. But the alternative, being alone on this deadly planet, was far worse. She nodded, accepting his offer. As they began to walk towards the humans' makeshift camp, Lyra felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. For the first time since she was abandoned, she wasn't completely alone. As they reached the camp, Lyra observed the humans more closely. They moved with a purpose, efficiently setting up equipment and organizing supplies. Despite the grimness of their situation, there was a camaraderie among them that Lyra had never experienced with her own people. Captain Morgan directed the team with a calm authority, his presence reassuring even in this hostile environment. "We're going to get through this," he said, almost as if to himself. "We just need to hold out until we can send a distress signal." Lyra felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, these humans could help her survive on this planet. And in return, she might just help them find a way off it. The camp was a hive of activity as the humans worked together to prepare for the long night ahead. The planet's temperatures dropped drastically after sunset, and the team knew they needed to secure the perimeter and fortify their position against any potential threats. Lyra observed them quietly, still unsure of her place among these strangers. Captain Morgan handed her a small ration pack. "Eat up. You'll need your strength." Lyra took the pack hesitantly, opening it to reveal a compact but nutrient-rich meal. As she ate, she couldn't help but watch the humans interact. There was an easy banter between them, a sense of unity that contrasted sharply with the cold, hierarchical nature of her own people. It was something Lyra had never experienced before, something that made her feel strangely envious. As the night deepened, the group gathered around a small fire. The flickering flames cast long shadows on their faces, highlighting the weariness etched into their expressions. Yet despite the exhaustion, there was a determination in their eyes that Lyra found both comforting and inspiring. "So, Lyra," one of the men said, breaking the silence. He was younger than the others, with a friendly demeanor and a quick smile. "How did you end up here?" Lyra hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. But the genuine curiosity in the man's eyes made her feel safe enough to share her story. "My people, the Zephyrins, they left me here. They thought I was too weak to survive." The man frowned, clearly troubled by her words. "That's rough. But you're still here, and that says something." Captain Morgan, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke up. "Strength isn't just about physical power. It's about resilience, determination, and the will to survive. You've got that, Lyra. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made it this far." Lyra looked down, feeling a strange mix of emotions. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such respect and understanding. It was as if these humans saw something in her that even she couldn't see. "What about you?" Lyra asked, eager to change the subject. "How did you end up here?" Captain Morgan exchanged glances with his team before answering. "We were on a mission, a deep space exploration assignment. Our ship was caught in a sudden meteor storm, and we were forced to crash land on this planet. Most of our crew didn't make it, but we're determined to survive and find a way off this rock." Lyra nodded, understanding their plight all too well. She had been wandering the planet for what felt like an eternity, with no hope of rescue in sight. But now, with these humans, there was a glimmer of hope, a chance that they might find a way to escape together. "Do you have a plan?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Morgan nodded. "We're trying to repair our communications equipment. If we can get a signal out, there's a chance we can call for help. But the terrain here is tough, and we need to find higher ground to boost the signal." Lyra's mind raced. She knew this planet better than anyone, its dangers, its secrets, and its potential safe havens. Perhaps with her knowledge, she could help these humans in their mission. "I might be able to help," she offered tentatively. "There's a mountain range to the east. It's the highest point on this continent. If we can reach it, you might be able to send a signal from there." The team's eyes lit up with renewed hope. "That's exactly what we need," Morgan said, his voice firm with resolve. "But it won't be easy. The journey will be dangerous, and we'll need to be prepared for anything." Lyra nodded, a sense of purpose filling her for the first time in what felt like forever. "I'm ready. I want to help." Morgan smiled, a rare expression of warmth crossing his usually stern features. "Good. We'll leave at first light." As the night wore on, the group settled down to rest, knowing that the next day would bring new challenges. Lyra lay on the cold ground, staring up at the unfamiliar constellations in the sky. Despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, she felt a strange sense of belonging among these humans, something she had never felt with her own people. For the first time since being abandoned, Lyra felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was part of something bigger. And with that thought, she allowed herself to drift into a restless sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring the first steps toward their shared goal: survival. The sun had barely risen when the group began their trek toward the distant mountains. The landscape was unforgiving, with jagged rocks and treacherous terrain that tested their endurance at every step. Lyra led the way, her knowledge of the planet's geography guiding them through the most navigable paths. The humans followed close behind, their eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of danger. Despite the harsh conditions, there was a palpable sense of determination in the group. Each step brought them closer to their goal, and with it, a renewed hope that they might survive this ordeal. For Lyra, this journey was about more than just survival. It was a chance to prove to herself, and to the humans, that she wasn't the weak, helpless girl her people had left behind. Captain Morgan walked beside her, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. "You're doing great, Lyra," he said, his voice steady and encouraging. "We've made good progress so far." Lyra nodded, though her mind was occupied with thoughts of what lay ahead. The mountain range was still a day's journey away, and the terrain would only get tougher as they approached. But she knew they couldn't afford to slow down, not if they wanted to reach higher ground before nightfall. As they continued, the group fell into a rhythm, each member contributing to the effort. Harris, the ship's engineer, took on the task of scanning the area with a handheld device, searching for any signs of life or potential threats. Tom, the pilot, kept the mood light with his jokes and easygoing demeanor, despite the gravity of their situation. The camaraderie between the humans was something Lyra admired, even envied. It was clear they had been through a lot together, and their bond was strong, something that gave them an edge in this hostile environment. She couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to be part of such a team, to have people who trusted and relied on her. As the day wore on, the group reached a narrow pass that cut through a series of rocky cliffs. The path was steep and winding, with loose stones that made every step a precarious one. Lyra paused at the entrance, her instincts telling her that something wasn't right. "We need to be careful here," she warned, her voice low. "This pass is known for rock slides." Morgan nodded, his expression serious. "We'll take it slow. Stay close, everyone." They proceeded with caution, their movements deliberate and measured. The air was tense, the silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps crunching on the gravel. Lyra kept her senses sharp, every fiber of her being on alert for the slightest sign of danger. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the pass, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. "Rock slide," Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the rising panic. The group scrambled to find cover as the rocks above them began to shift and tumble down the cliffs. Lyra darted to the side, narrowly avoiding a large boulder that crashed down where she had been standing moments before. The humans did the same, ducking behind outcroppings and pressing themselves against the cliff walls. For a few harrowing moments, the pass was a cacophony of crashing rocks and dust-filled air. Lyra held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for the onslaught to end. When the dust finally began to settle, she cautiously peeked out from her hiding place. "Everyone okay?" Captain Morgan called out, his voice strained but steady. A chorus of affirmations followed, and one by one, the group emerged from their makeshift shelters. Lyra let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, relieved to see that everyone was unharmed. "That was too close," Tom muttered, brushing dirt from his suit. "But hey, at least we're all still in one piece." Harris nodded in agreement, his expression grim. "We need to keep moving. This place isn't safe." Lyra led them forward, her resolve hardening with each step. The rock slide had been a reminder of just how dangerous this planet was, but it had also reinforced her determination to see this mission through. She wouldn't let fear hold her back, not when so much was at stake. As they emerged from the pass, the landscape began to change. The jagged rocks gave way to a series of rolling hills, and in the distance, the mountains loomed ever closer. The air was cooler here, and the sky had taken on a deep, rich hue as the sun began its descent. "We're getting close," Lyra said, a hint of excitement creeping into her voice. "Just over those hills, and we'll have a clear view of the mountains." The group pushed on, their spirits lifted by the sight of their destination. As they crested the final hill, the full expanse of the mountain range came into view. The peaks were tall and imposing, their snow-capped summits glinting in the fading light. But more importantly, there was a sense of possibility in the air, a feeling that, despite everything, they might just make it. "This is it," Morgan said, his voice filled with a quiet determination. "We'll set up camp here for the night. Tomorrow we'll begin the final ascent." Lyra looked out at the mountains, a mixture of fear and hope swirling in her chest. The journey had been long and difficult, but she knew it was far from over. The challenges ahead would test them all, but for the first time, she felt ready to face them, not alone, but with allies by her side. The next morning, the group awoke early, the chill of the high-altitude air biting at their skin. The mountains loomed large in the distance, their peaks shrouded in mist. It was a daunting sight, but one that filled them with a renewed sense of purpose. This was the final stretch, the last obstacle between them, and the possibility of rescue. Lyra led the way once again, her eyes scanning the terrain for the safest path. The climb would be treacherous, but she knew the mountains offered the best chance of reaching a vantage point high enough to send out a distress signal. The humans followed closely, their expressions grim but determined. Captain Morgan took up the rear, his gaze sweeping over the group. "Stay sharp," he called out. "This is the most dangerous part of the journey. We need to stick together." The ascent began slowly, each step carefully placed on the uneven ground. The air grew thinner as they climbed, and the group was soon gasping for breath. The mountains were not just a physical challenge, they were a mental one too. The harsh conditions tested their resolve, pushing them to their limits. As they climbed, the wind picked up, howling through the narrow passes and tugging at their clothes. The temperature dropped even further, and soon the group was shivering, their movements slowed by the cold. But they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that this was their only chance of survival. Halfway up the mountain, the group came across a narrow ledge that wound its way around a steep cliff face. The path was barely wide enough for one person to pass at a time, and the drop below was dizzying. Lyra hesitated, her heart pounding as she looked down at the sheer drop. "We have to cross," Captain Morgan said, his voice steady. "It's the only way forward." Lyra nodded, steeling herself for the task ahead. She stepped onto the ledge, her movements slow and deliberate. The wind buffeted her from the side, threatening to knock her off balance, but she kept going, inching her way along the narrow path. The others followed, each one focused on keeping their footing. The tension was palpable, the silence broken only by the sound of their labored breathing and the occasional scrape of boots against the rock. It felt like an eternity, but finally they'd made it to the other side. As they regrouped, Lyra's heart finally began to slow. The danger had been real, but they had overcome it together. She glanced at the humans, who were catching their breath, and felt a surge of gratitude. She wasn't alone anymore. She had allies who would face these challenges with her. The climb continued, the terrain growing steeper and more treacherous with every step. They were now high enough that the air was thin and cold, and every breath was a struggle. But they didn't stop. They couldn't afford to. Hours passed, the sun slowly making its way across the sky. As they neared the summit, the group's energy began to wane. Harris stumbled, nearly losing his footing, but Morgan caught him, pulling him back to safety. "Take a moment," Morgan said, his voice firm but understanding. "We're almost there, just a little further." Lyra looked up at the peak, so close yet still so far. Her legs were trembling from the effort, her lungs burning with each breath. But she refused to give up. She had come too far to turn back now. With renewed determination, the group pressed on. The final stretch was the hardest, the path so steep that they had to use their hands to pull themselves up. But inch by inch, they climbed higher, until finally they'd reached the summit. The view from the top was breathtaking. The entire planet stretched out before them, a vast expanse of rugged terrain and swirling clouds. But more importantly, they were high enough to send out a distress signal. It was their best chance of being rescued. Tom immediately set to work, pulling out the emergency beacon and adjusting its settings. Harris helped, his engineering skills ensuring that everything was in working order. Meanwhile, Morgan and Lyra scanned the horizon, looking for any signs of life. "There," Lyra said, pointing to a distant speck in the sky. "Is that a ship?" Morgan squinted, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make out the shape. "It could be," he said, hope creeping into his voice. "Tom, get that signal out. We need to make contact." Tom nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. "It's ready," he said. "Sending the signal now." They waited in tense silence, their eyes fixed on the distant speck. For a moment, nothing happened, and Lyra's heart sank. But then, the speck grew larger, moving steadily toward them. It was a ship, a rescue ship. "We did it," Morgan said, a smile breaking across his face. "We're going to be okay." The group let out a collective sigh of relief, the tension that had been building for days finally releasing. Lyra felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. There would be time for emotions later. For now, they needed to focus on getting off this planet. As the ship approached, Lyra looked out at the mountains one last time. This place had tested her in ways she never could have imagined, but it had also given her something invaluable, a sense of strength and resilience she hadn't known she possessed. The ship landed on a flat expanse nearby, and a ramp extended from its side. A group of humans emerged, dressed in rescue gear and armed with medical supplies. They moved quickly, ushering the survivors onto the ship and checking them for injuries. As Lyra boarded the ship, she felt a sense of closure. The ordeal was over. She was no longer the girl who had been left to die on a hostile planet. She was a survivor, one who had found allies in the most unexpected of places. As the ship lifted off, leaving the mountains behind, Lyra knew that her journey was far from over. But whatever came next, she would face it with the strength she had discovered within herself, and with the knowledge that she was not alone. The rescue ship soared through the skies, leaving the desolate landscape of the mountains behind. Lyra watched as the jagged peaks shrank in the distance, a sense of relief washing over her. The ordeal on this hostile planet was finally coming to an end, but her mind was still racing with the events that had brought her here. The crew of the rescue ship, efficient and professional, quickly assessed the condition of the survivors. Captain Morgan, Harris, Tom, and Lyra were guided to a medical bay where they were given water, food, and a brief examination. The ship's medic, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Elara Vaughn, checked Lyra's vitals with practiced ease. "You're dehydrated, but otherwise you seem fine," Dr. Vaughn said, her voice calm and reassuring. "You're lucky we found you when we did." "Lucky," Lyra echoed, though she knew it had been more than luck. It had been determination, teamwork, and the willingness to fight against the odds. Captain Morgan approached as Dr. Vaughn moved on to check Harris. He gave Lyra a nod, his expression softened by the relief of survival. "You did well out there," he said. "We all did." Lyra looked around at the humans, the people who had become her unexpected allies. They had saved her life, and in turn, she had helped them survive the unforgiving planet. It was a bond forged in adversity, one that she would not soon forget. As the ship continued its journey, Tom appeared at Lyra's side, a small smile on his face. "You've got some serious survival skills, you know that." Lyra laughed, a sound that felt strange after the tension of the past days. "I guess I had to learn quickly," she replied. "But I wouldn't have made it without all of you." Tom shrugged modestly. "It was a team effort, but you were the one who knew the land. Without your guidance, we'd still be down there, trying to figure out which way was up." Their conversation was interrupted by a chime over the ship's intercom. "Attention, crew and passengers," a voice announced. "We are approaching the main fleet. Prepare for docking." Lyra's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the fleet. She had heard stories of the human space armée, but she had never imagined she would see it herself. The thought of being among so many humans was both thrilling and intimidating. As the ship neared the fleet, Lyra looked out a nearby viewport and gasped. Massive starships, each one a marvel of engineering, filled the space around them. The fleet was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience, a force that had traversed the stars in search of new horizons. The ship docked with one of the larger vessels, a battleship named the Indomitable. The transition was smooth, and soon the survivors were being escorted through the ship's corridors by a group of uniformed officers. Lyra marveled at the scale of the ship, the endless corridors, the hum of machinery, the sense of purpose that pervaded every inch of it. Captain Morgan, Harris, Tom, and Lyra were brought to a debriefing room, where they were greeted by Admiral Evelyn Grant, a stern woman with a commanding presence. She listened as Captain Morgan gave a concise report of their ordeal on the planet, her expression unreadable. When he finished, the Admiral turned her gaze to Lyra. "And you, Miss Lyra, you were left behind by your people." Lyra nodded, feeling a mixture of emotions. "Yes, Admiral. They thought I was weak, unworthy of survival. But I've proven them wrong." Admiral Grant's eyes softened slightly. "You've shown great courage. The fact that you're standing here today is proof of that. We welcome you among us, as an ally." The words filled Lyra with a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in a long time. She was no longer an outcast. She was part of something greater, something that valued her for who she was, not what she was expected to be. The debriefing ended, and the survivors were given quarters to rest and recover. As Lyra lay in the unfamiliar yet comforting bed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced monstrous creatures, harsh environments, and the crushing weight of abandonment, but she had emerged stronger. The humans had shown her compassion and strength, qualities that her own people had overlooked. They had given her hope, and in return, she had found a new purpose. She was determined to use her newfound strength to help others, to prove that she was far from weak. As sleep began to claim her, Lyra made a silent vow. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on. She would fight for her place in this vast universe, and she would do it alongside the humans who had shown her the power of resilience and determination. The following days aboard the Indomitable were a whirlwind of activity for Lyra. She was introduced to various members of the crew, each one more welcoming than the last. Despite being an alien in a predominantly human environment, she never felt out of place. The humans treated her as one of their own, valuing her knowledge and experience. Captain Morgan, Harris, and Tom were also busy, each taking on roles within the ship's operations. Lyra found herself gravitating towards the ship's science division, where her understanding of alien environments and survival tactics was invaluable. Dr. Vaughn, who had taken a particular interest in Lyra's well-being, introduced her to Lieutenant Mira Lawson, the head of the ship's science team. Mira was a tall, slender woman with an air of quiet confidence. She greeted Lyra with a warm smile. "I've heard a lot about you," Mira said as they toured the science labs. "Captain Morgan speaks very highly of your skills. We could use someone like you on the team." Lyra was taken aback by the offer. "You want me to join the science team?" Mira nodded. "You've shown that you can handle yourself in tough situations, and your knowledge of alien ecosystems is impressive. We're always looking to expand our understanding of the universe, and you could help us do that." It was an opportunity Lyra hadn't expected, but one that excited her. She had always been curious about the world beyond her own, and now she had the chance to explore it in ways she had never imagined. "I'd be honored," Lyra said, her voice filled with determination. "I want to contribute to this ship and help in any way I can." Mira smiled. "Welcome to the team, Lyra." The days that followed were filled with learning and discovery. Lyra worked closely with Mira and the other scientists, sharing her insights and learning about the advanced technologies the humans use to study the universe. She quickly became an integral part of the team, her unique perspective providing valuable contributions. Meanwhile, the Indomitable continued its mission in deep space, exploring uncharted territories and searching for signs of other civilizations. Lyra was constantly amazed by the humans' thirst for knowledge and their unwavering drive to push the boundaries of what was possible. During this time, Lyra also formed a close bond with Tom. The pilot's easygoing nature and sense of humor were a perfect counterbalance to Lyra's more serious demeanor. They spent hours talking about their respective cultures, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. "You've come a long way since we found you on that planet," Tom said one evening as they sat in the ship's observation deck, watching the stars drift by. Lyra nodded, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse of space. "I've learned so much about the universe and about myself. I never thought I'd find a place where I truly belong." Tom smiled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Well, you're stuck with us now. We're not letting you go anytime soon." Lyra laughed, feeling a warmth spread through her. "I wouldn't want to be anywhere else." As the weeks turned into months, Lyra's sense of purpose grew stronger. She was no longer the girl who had been left to die on a barren planet. She was a valuable member of the Indomitable's crew, contributing to their mission of exploration and discovery. But even as she embraced her new life, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something unresolved. Her people, the Zillions, had abandoned her, casting her aside as weak and unworthy. But she was not weak. She had proven her strength time and time again. One day, as Lyra worked in the science lab, Captain Morgan approached her. His expression was serious, but there was a glint of determination in his eyes. "Lyra," he began, "we've received a transmission from your homeworld." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't thought about her homeworld in months, but now, the memories came flooding back. The pain of being cast out, the loneliness of wandering the barren planet, the anger at being deemed unworthy. "What do they want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want to talk," Captain Morgan replied. "They've heard about your survival and your work with us. It seems they've had a change of heart." Lyra's emotions were a whirlwind. Part of her wanted to reject the overture, to prove that she didn't need them. But another part of her, the part that still yearned for acceptance, was curious, even hopeful. "What should I do?" she asked, looking to Captain Morgan for guidance. Morgan's expression softened. "That's up to you, Lyra. But whatever you decide, know that you have a place here with us. You've earned our respect, and we stand with you, no matter what." Lyra took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was a decision that could change everything. She could confront her past and seek the acceptance she had been denied, or she could continue on her path with the humans, leaving her old life behind. After a moment of contemplation, Lyra made her decision. Lyra stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, gazing out at the stars as the ship approached the coordinates of her homeworld. The decision to return had not been an easy one, but it was one she knew she had to make. She needed closure, a chance to confront the people who had left her for dead. Captain Morgan, Tom, and Mira stood by her side, their presence a comforting reminder that she was not facing this alone. The bond she had formed with the humans was unbreakable, and it gave her the strength to face whatever awaited her on the Zillion homeworld. The planet came into view on the main screen, its familiar blue and green surface stirring memories of a life Lyra had long since left behind. But this time, she was not the same person who had been cast out. She was stronger, more confident, and determined to prove her worth. As the Indomitable entered orbit, a transmission came through from the planet's surface. The face of a Zillion elder appeared on the screen, his expression one of surprise and apprehension. "Lyra," the elder said, his voice filled with a mixture of emotions. "You've returned." "Yes," Lyra replied, her voice steady. "I've come to speak with the council." The elder nodded, and the transmission ended. Moments later, the Indomitable's shuttle was cleared to land. Lyra and her human companions boarded the shuttle, and within minutes, they were descending towards the planet's surface. The landing was smooth, and as the shuttle's ramp lowered, Lyra took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. The Zillion Council was waiting for them, a group of elders dressed in flowing robes that marked their status. Lyra stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The elders regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and unease. They had not expected her to survive, let alone return with humans at her side. "Lyra," one of the elders began, "we have heard of your survival and your alliance with these humans. We wish to understand how this has come to be." Lyra met the elder's gaze, her expression unyielding. "You abandoned me," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You left me to die because you believed I was weak. But I survived, not because of your judgment, but because of my own strength and the help of these humans." The elders exchanged glances, clearly unsettled by Lyra's words. Another elder, a woman with silver hair, stepped forward. "We see now that we were wrong to cast you out. You have proven yourself in ways we did not expect. We ask for your forgiveness and offer you a place among us once more." Lyra considered the offer, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. This was what she had wanted for so long, to be accepted, to belong. But as she looked at the humans who had stood by her side through everything, she realized that she had already found her place. "I appreciate your offer," Lyra said slowly, "but I no longer need your acceptance to know my worth. I have found a new family, one that values me for who I am, not who I was expected to be." The elder with silver hair nodded, her expression one of understanding. "You have grown beyond our expectations, Lyra. We wish you well on your journey, wherever it may take you." With that, the meeting was over. Lyra turned away from the council, feeling a sense of closure that she hadn't expected. She had faced her past and emerged stronger for it. As she boarded the shuttle with her human friends, she knew that her future lay with them. As the shuttle lifted off, carrying Lyra away from the planet that had once been her home, she felt a sense of peace. She had found her strength, her purpose, and her place in the universe. The Indomitable resumed its mission, exploring the vastness of space with Lyra as a valued member of its crew. Together, they faced new challenges and discovered new wonders, always moving forward, always together. And as they journeyed through the stars, Lyra knew that she was no longer the girl who had been left to die. She was a survivor, a warrior, and a part of something greater than herself. The universe was vast, and her journey was just beginning.